His wife accidentally sent him a voice memo meant for her secret lover. What he heard changed everything. "I wish he'd just dropped dead already so I can finally cash out. He still believes I love him. That's the funniest part. You won't believe I've been moving money from the scholarship fund for months and he hasn't noticed a thing." Those were the exact words Melissa whispered into a voice memo, never realizing she'd just sent it to her husband instead of her secret lover. She had no idea the man listening on the other end wasn't just heartbroken, but already orchestrating the most brutal revenge in infidelity history. What happened next will make you question everything you think you know about love, betrayal, and revenge. Viewers, have you ever trusted someone so deeply that their deception felt like a knife twisting slowly in your chest? How would you respond? Let us know in the comments. The rain drummed against the windows of Bryan Ford's corner office on the 28th floor of the Meridian Tower in downtown Denver. Tuesday mornings usually brought their own rhythm: conference calls, project reviews, the steady hum of building an empire one calculated decision at a time. At 38, Bryan had mastered the art of quiet success. His cybersecurity firm catered to high-profile clients, and though his net worth exceeded $18 million, he still drove his dependable Subaru and lived in the same craftsman-style home in the Highlands neighborhood, the home where he and Melissa had built their life from scratch. His phone buzzed on the mahogany desk. A voice memo from Melissa. She often sent him snippets throughout the day, updates about Emma's schoolwork, errands, or dinner plans. Bryan smiled, expecting her usual soft chatter. He tapped play and leaned back in his leather chair. "I can't believe I'm still stuck here with that lifeless rich zombie." Melissa's voice sliced through the quiet like a scalpel. "Do you know he told me he can't imagine life without me?" I almost laughed. "Dante, I wish he'd just dropped dead already so I can finally cash out." Bryan sat upright. His heart thudded once hard. This wasn't meant for him. He quickly sent the memo to another device. "But I'll keep smiling until I bleed him dry," she continued, her tone disturbingly casual. "The idiot's worth millions and still doesn't realize I've been rerouting money from the foundation account, the children's scholarship fund. God, he's so naive, it makes me sick." Bryan's knuckles whitened around his phone. The recording kept going. Melissa describing how she manipulated financial reports, laughed at Bryan's trust, and ridiculed intimate moments they once shared. Last night, when he tried to hold my hand during one of his romantic moments, I almost gagged. But I need him docile just a bit longer. Once enough is secured, we'll finally be together. No more pretending to care about his boring foundation work, or listening to him ramble about Emma's future. Emma, their 6-year-old daughter who still waited at the door every evening when Bryan came home, who believed her parents were best friends, who drew pictures of their family with stick figures, hearts and smiles stretching from ear to ear. The voice memo ended. Bryan stared out at the rain-slicked skyline. 8 years of marriage. 8 years of what he thought was love, integrity, partnership, now reduced to a data file and a betrayal so complete it stole his breath. Moments later, another alert. The voice memo had been deleted. Melissa had realized her mistake. His phone rang. Her name lit up the screen. "Bryan, honey." Her voice sparkled with artificial warmth. "Did you get any weird messages from me? My phone's been glitching all morning, sending random audio files. You know how technology hates me." Bryan exhaled slowly, voice even. "No strange messages here. Just your usual sweet notes." "Oh, good. I was worried I accidentally sent you one of those voice-to-text disasters." Melissa laughed lightly over the phone. "You know, where the phone randomly picks up background noise. I was at the community center earlier, and Dante and I were talking about the literacy program. He's been such a huge help with the foundation's expansion plans." Dante Shaw, the same name she had whispered in that voice memo. The man she was not only having an affair with, but the one she was conspiring with to steal from Bryan's foundation. Bryan kept his voice steady, neutral. "That's great, honey. I really appreciate both of you putting in the extra hours." "We should have him over for dinner sometime," she said, casual as ever. "I think you'd like him. He's got great ideas about reaching more families." Bryan resisted the urge to laugh. She was suggesting dinner with her lover while still siphoning money from the very foundation built to give underprivileged kids a chance at college. When the call ended, Bryan sat in complete stillness. The rain outside had quieted, but inside, a storm brewed. He thought of Emma, probably in art class, coloring quietly with that same intense focus she applied to everything. She would come home full of stories, expecting another warm dinner and bedtime routine. She believed in the version of her family that Bryan had, until today, believed in too. But Bryan Ford hadn't built a cybersecurity empire by reacting emotionally. Every successful acquisition, every contract, every defensive algorithm had been constructed through precision, patience, and quiet strategy. This would be no different. He pressed the intercom button. "Tom, can you come in for a moment?" His assistant entered promptly, notepad ready. Tom had been with him for 4 years, trustworthy, discreet, and efficient. "I need you to schedule a confidential meeting with Jillian Rhodes at Rhodes Associates tomorrow morning. Tell her it's in regard to urgent financial discrepancies at the foundation." Tom nodded. "Understood. Privacy and discretion?" "Total discretion," Bryan said. "No one outside this room knows about the meeting, and I'll need you to clear my calendar from 9 to noon. After Tom left, Bryan took the voice memo and made multiple backups. His private offline server, encrypted cloud storage, and a physical backup drive that he personally locked in his biometric office safe. He'd built his company to protect secrets. Now he would use that same skill to expose one. The rest of his day passed in surreal normalcy. He sat through meetings, reviewed investor reports, and discussed launch protocols for a new cybersecurity tool. But behind every conversation, his mind turned like a machine, calculating the scope of betrayal, the legal angles, the custody implications. That evening, he returned home to Emma's joyful hug and Melissa's practiced kiss on the cheek. He smiled on the outside, a man still performing for the audience of one, the woman who thought she'd fooled him completely. But beneath the mask, Bryan was already designing a firewall she couldn't breach. Wednesday morning found Bryan in the conference room at Rhodes Associates, Denver's top law firm. Across from him sat Jillian Rhodes, precise, sharp, and deliberate. Beside her were James Patterson, an expert in financial crimes, and Sarah Morgan, who handled digital evidence and forensic authentication. He pressed play on his phone. I almost laughed. "Dante, I wish he'd just dropped dead already so I can finally cash out." Melissa's voice filled the room. By the time the message ended, no one was blinking. "This isn't just betrayal," Jillian said. "If she's rerouting nonprofit funds, we're dealing with federal embezzlement, charity fraud, and possibly IRS violations. She won't walk away with a slap on the wrist." "She has full administrative access to the foundation," Bryan said. "When we started it 8 years ago, I focused on external partnerships. She handled community programs and disbursements. I never thought to question her reports." Patterson was already mapping out the strategy. "We'll start a deep forensic audit, quietly. We can trace where every dollar went." "She used her access to move money to shell nonprofits," Bryan added. "That's where you'll want to look first, especially anything connected to Dante Shaw." Jillian leaned in. "And while we do our part, you do yours. If you want full custody, full protection, and zero courtroom drama, you need to act like this is war, because it is." "I know," Bryan said. "No confrontations, no slip-ups." She continued. "You stay calm, affectionate, play the husband she thinks she's fooled. Meanwhile, we'll prepare all the paperwork, divorce, asset protection, criminal filings." The meeting stretched another hour as they mapped legal boundaries, coordinated with auditors, and created encrypted channels for document transfer. Bryan remained composed, but his mind never stopped moving. By noon, he was back in his car. The rain had stopped, but a storm still churned in his chest. When he arrived home, Melissa was already gone for her usual Thursday morning yoga class. He moved quickly. In under 90 minutes, Bryan installed 4 discrete motion-triggered HD cameras, one in the living room, one in the kitchen, one in the master bedroom, and one in his home office. Each one was hardwired to a private, encrypted server with multiple redundant backups. No audio in private areas without dual-party access. Everything above board, and everything undetectable. By the time Melissa returned, grocery bags in hand and humming a tune, the house was exactly how she'd left it. She had no idea she was walking into a digital cage. That night, Bryan kissed her cheek goodnight. Emma curled up beside them with her usual bedtime book, and Bryan read it to her with a steady voice and a steady smile. Melissa reached over and squeezed his hand. He squeezed back. And silently, the cameras began to watch. The following Tuesday, Bryan received a call from Jillian that changed everything. Her voice carried the satisfaction of a prosecutor who'd just discovered smoking gun evidence. "Bryan, you need to see what we've found. Can you come in this afternoon?" An hour later, Bryan sat in the same conference room, now covered with financial documents, printouts, and timeline charts. Patterson stood at a whiteboard covered with account numbers and transaction flows that looked like a complex conspiracy diagram. $412,000, Patterson announced without preamble. "Over 18 months, your wife has systematically transferred money from the Children's College Scholarship Fund into accounts controlled by the Urban Youth Development Initiative, a nonprofit that exists only on paper." He pointed to a series of bank statements. "The money flows from your foundation to Urban Youth Development, then immediately gets transferred to personal accounts belonging to Dante Shaw. He's been taking a cut and funneling the rest into investment accounts that list your wife as the beneficial owner." Sarah added, "We've also uncovered email communications between Melissa and Dante discussing the transfers. She's not just a victim of manipulation, she's the architect of this entire scheme." Jillian spread additional documents across the table. "We have hotel receipts, restaurant charges, rental agreements for the apartment where they meet. This has been going on for nearly 2 years, Bryan. It's not an affair that led to financial impropriety. It's a calculated theft operation disguised as an affair." Bryan studied the evidence, his cybersecurity background allowing him to appreciate the thoroughness of their investigation. "What's our next step?" "We need them on record, actively discussing the fraud," Jillian replied. "Audio or video evidence of them planning future thefts, discussing how they've hidden the money, detailing their long-term strategy. Tell her you are going on a business trip for 3 days. While you're away, we'll monitor everything that comes through the feed." Bryan replied, "I've already installed the surveillance, but I haven't caught her slipping yet. She's been too careful with me around." Sarah nodded. "Exactly. That's why this trip matters. She'll feel safe to move freely." Bryan sighed. "You want me to watch my wife betray me in real time? I want to build a case so strong that no defense attorney in the country could create reasonable doubt," Jillian replied firmly. "And I want to ensure that when this goes to trial, your wife and her accomplice face the full consequences of their actions." Bryan looked around the room at the assembled evidence of his marriage's destruction. "Set it up, whatever you need. File for divorce, and I want custody of Emma. I want her access to all my accounts revoked." "One more thing." Jillian smiled. "Your anniversary is in 10 days. Let's make it truly memorable. Seattle clients are demanding an in-person presentation," Bryan announced over breakfast Thursday morning, playing his role to perfection. 3 days of meetings, but the contract could be worth $2 million if we land it. Melissa's eyes sparkled with barely contained excitement. "Hope you won't stay long. Remember, our anniversary is in just 10 days. "I'm devastated about the timing," Bryan replied, watching Emma eat her cereal with focused concentration. "I'll be home in 3 days and we'll plan our anniversary together." "Of course, honey. Business comes first. I understand completely." Melissa kissed his cheek, her performance flawless. "Emma and I will have a girls' weekend, won't we, sweetheart?" Emma nodded enthusiastically, unaware that her father would actually be 15 minutes away in a rented house, watching monitors connected to cameras already installed throughout their home by Bryan himself. The surveillance system had been tested, encrypted, and routed through multiple secure servers. The setup was silent, invisible. Bryan had taken no chances. By Thursday evening, he was settled in the rental house with Jillian and Sarah, watching multiple screens display different angles of his home. Emma had gone to her grandmother's for their planned sleepover, leaving Melissa alone for the first time in years. At 8:15 p.m., Dante Shaw's silver BMW pulled into Bryan's driveway. Bryan watched as Melissa opened their front door with an enthusiasm she hadn't shown him in years. She threw herself into Dante's arms, kissing him passionately in the same entryway where Bryan said goodbye to his family every morning. 3 whole days without the walking corpse, Melissa laughed, leading Dante into the living room. We should toast to our success. They opened Bryan's expensive wine collection, the bottles he'd been saving for special occasions. Melissa raised her glass with theatrical flair, to the stupidest rich man in Colorado, and to bleeding him completely dry. Dante's laugh was cruel. To your brilliant performance as the loving wife. You deserve an Oscar for this act. The cameras captured everything in devastating clarity. Melissa detailed their timeline for the final asset grab, discussed how she'd manipulate the divorce proceedings to maximize her settlement, even practiced crying on command for her eventual victim testimony. The foundation audit is coming up next month, she said, curling against Dante on Bryan's couch. We need to move the remaining funds before then. Can your nonprofit handle another $200,000? Baby, my nonprofit can handle whatever you need it to handle, Dante replied. By Christmas, we'll be in the Caribbean with enough money to live like royalty. The divorce papers will be devastating, Melissa said, curling against Dante on the couch where Bryan watched movies with Emma every Friday night. I'll claim emotional abandonment, maybe hint at verbal abuse. Make myself the victim of a workaholic husband who prioritized money over marriage. Dante laughed, pulling her closer. And I'll be the supportive friend who helped you through the difficult transition. We'll be so careful, so appropriate. Just 2 people who found love after your tragic marriage ended. I've been thinking about the custody battle, Melissa continued. If I play it right, I can get primary custody of Emma and maximum spousal support. Bryan's so desperate to avoid conflict he'll probably agree to whatever I ask for just to keep things quiet. They spent the next hour detailing their strategy, how Melissa would stage emotional breakdowns, which friends she'd confide in to build a narrative of neglect, how they'd hide their relationship until the divorce was finalized. Dante even suggested Melissa see a therapist to establish a paper trail of emotional trauma. You're brilliant, Melissa said, kissing him again. Bryan never saw any of this coming. He's probably in Seattle right now, completely clueless, thinking his devoted wife is home missing him. Bryan watched his wife betray him in real time, each word recorded in high definition, every gesture documented. Jillian made notes throughout the evening, building her prosecution case in real time. This is better than I hoped, she whispered. They're not just admitting to past crimes, they're planning new ones. By Sunday evening, they had captured 67 hours of devastating evidence. Let's make this anniversary unforgettable, Bryan announced Monday morning over coffee, his voice warm with manufactured enthusiasm. 8 years deserves a real celebration. What if we invited everyone? Both families, our closest friends, maybe even some of the people from the foundation. Melissa's face lit up like Christmas morning. Bryan, that sounds wonderful. The Capitol Grill has that beautiful private dining room. We could make it really special. I was thinking we should invite Dante too, Bryan added casually, watching her reaction. Since he's been so helpful with the foundation work, you once said we should have him over for dinner. Seems like a perfect occasion. A flicker of panic crossed Melissa's features before the mask snapped back into place. Oh, that's such a thoughtful idea. I'm sure he'd be honored to join us. The week flew by in a blur of preparations. Melissa threw herself into planning with genuine excitement, believing she was orchestrating the perfect final performance before destroying Bryan's life. She arranged flowers, selected wine pairings, even bought a new dress for the occasion. Friday evening arrived with Denver's crisp autumn air carrying the promise of snow. The Capitol Grill's private dining room glowed with warm light, mahogany panels and leather chairs creating an atmosphere of intimate celebration. Melissa had outdone herself with the arrangements: fresh orchids, personalized menu cards, even a small string quartet. 22 people gathered around the extended table. Both sets of parents, siblings, Emma, their closest couple friends, several foundation board members, and Dante Shaw, who arrived wearing an expensive suit and the confident smile of a man who believed he was untouchable. Emma sat between her parents, radiant in her party dress, chattering excitedly about the fancy restaurant and the special dinner. She had no idea this evening would shatter her understanding of family, trust, and the adults she depended on. "Before we begin," Bryan said, standing and raising his wine glass, "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. 8 years of marriage has taught me so much about love, loyalty, and the importance of truth in our relationships." Melissa beamed, probably expecting romantic words about their journey together. Dante looked relaxed, playing his role as the helpful family friend. The assembled guests smiled expectantly, ready to toast a successful marriage. "But before we celebrate," Bryan continued, "I think everyone should understand exactly what we're toasting." He pulled out his phone and connected it to the room's sound system. "8 years ago, Melissa promised to love and honor me. Tonight, I want you all to hear how she really feels about those vows." The room fell silent. Melissa's smile faltered slightly, confusion flickering in her eyes. Bryan pressed play. "I can't believe I'm still stuck here with that lifeless rich zombie." Melissa's voice filled the elegant dining room, crystal clear and unmistakably hers. The guests froze, wine glasses suspended halfway to their lips, confusion rippling across their faces like stones thrown into still water. "Do you know he asked me if I still loved him?" I almost laughed. "Dante, I wish he'd just dropped dead already so I can finally cash out." The color drained from Melissa's face as her own voice detailed the foundation theft, mocked their intimate moments, and laughed about bleeding Bryan dry. Around the table, shocked silence gave way to gasps of disbelief. Emma looked confused, her young mind unable to process the cruelty in her mother's recorded words. "Bryan, stop this," Melissa whispered, reaching across the table toward his phone. "This isn't—" But Bryan stepped back, letting the recording continue. Dante sat frozen, his confident smile dissolving as Melissa's voice revealed their entire scheme to the assembled guests. When the audio ended, Bryan set his phone aside and picked up a tablet. But wait, there's more. The room's wall-mounted television flickered to life, displaying high-definition surveillance footage from their living room. The guests watched in stunned silence as Melissa and Dante toasted Bryan's stupidity and planned their final asset grab. 3 whole days without the walking corpse, Melissa's recorded image laughed on screen. "We should toast to our success." Bryan's mother covered her mouth in horror. Melissa's sister stared at the screen with dawning revulsion. Even the string quartet had stopped playing, their instruments forgotten as they witnessed the collapse of what everyone had believed was a happy marriage. "You didn't just lose your mask, Melissa," Bryan said quietly, placing a thick envelope in front of his wife. "You lost your entire performance. These are divorce papers, along with complete documentation of your theft from the Children's College Scholarship Fund." Melissa's hands shook as she tried to speak. "Bryan, please, not here, not in front of Emma?" Bryan's voice remained calm, steady. "You should have thought about Emma before you stole from children who needed college money. You should have thought about her before you planned to use her as leverage in custody battles." The dining room door opened, and 2 Denver police officers entered, followed by Agent Riley from the Financial Crimes Division, timed perfectly with the final video's end. "Melissa Ford?" Agent Riley's badge gleamed in the restaurant's lighting. "You're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes." The handcuffs clicked with metallic finality. Melissa looked around the table desperately, seeking sympathy from family members who now stared at her with disgust and betrayal. "Dante Shaw?" The second officer approached the table. "You're also under arrest." As they were led away, Melissa tried one last performance. "Bryan, please, I'm sorry. I made mistakes. But think about Emma." "I am thinking about Emma," Bryan replied. "I'm thinking about the college fund you stole from her and hundreds of other children. I'm thinking about protecting her from people who use love as a weapon." The restaurant staff discreetly cleared the table as guests sat in stunned silence. Bryan's father finally spoke. "Son, we had no idea. If there's anything we can do." Bryan gathered Emma into his arms, her small body trembling with confusion and fear. "We'll be fine," he said softly. "Sometimes the truth hurts before it heals." The Jefferson County Courthouse had seen its share of bitter divorces, but the Ford case drew unusual attention. Word had spread through Denver's legal community about the evidence Bryan's team had assembled, a masterclass in documenting betrayal so thoroughly that opposing counsel had little room to maneuver. Melissa entered the courtroom wearing a navy blue suit, her lawyer whispering last-minute strategy adjustments. She'd tried to control the narrative after the disastrous anniversary dinner, claiming the voice memo was taken out of context, that her marriage had been troubled for years, that Bryan's work obsession had driven her to seek emotional support elsewhere. But Bryan's legal team, led by Jillian Rhodes, had prepared for every possible defense. "Your Honor," Jillian began, "this case involves not just marital betrayal, but systematic financial fraud perpetrated against a charitable foundation designed to help underprivileged children attend college." The evidence presentation was methodical and devastating. Bank records showed the exact path of stolen money. Text message transcripts revealed premeditated deception. Hotel receipts proved the affair's timeline, and photographs with metadata confirmed lies about Melissa's whereabouts. Judge Patricia Morrison reviewed the financial documents with increasing gravity. "Mrs. Ford, you're alleged to have diverted over $400,000 from a registered charity. These are serious criminal allegations beyond the scope of divorce proceedings." Melissa's lawyer attempted damage control, arguing that his client had been emotionally abandoned, that her actions, while regrettable, stemmed from a marriage in crisis. He painted her as a victim of Bryan's workaholic tendencies, a lonely wife who had made poor decisions while seeking connection. Then Jillian played the surveillance footage from Dante's visit. The courtroom watched in silence as Melissa toasted Bryan's stupidity and detailed plans to maximize spousal support through manufactured emotional trauma. Her casual discussion of using Emma as leverage in custody battles drew audible gasps from the gallery. "This isn't a woman driven to poor decisions by marital problems," Jillian stated. "This is calculated fraud, executed with premeditation and malice." Judge Morrison called a brief recess, during which Bryan noticed Agent Riley from the Financial Crimes Division taking notes in the back row. The criminal implications were becoming impossible to ignore. When court resumed, Melissa's lawyer made a desperate pivot, requesting time to negotiate a settlement that would avoid criminal referral. But Bryan had made his position clear. He wanted full custody of Emma, complete asset protection, and criminal prosecution for the foundation theft. "Mrs. Ford," Judge Morrison said, "I'm referring the financial evidence to the District Attorney's Office for criminal review. Regarding the divorce proceedings, given the evidence of fraud and deception, I'm granting Mr. Ford's requests for full custody and asset protection." Melissa finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your Honor, I made mistakes, but I'm still Emma's mother. I love my daughter." "Your choices regarding your daughter's future suggest otherwise," Judge Morrison replied coldly. As they left the courthouse, Bryan saw Dante Shaw in handcuffs near the building's side entrance, Agent Riley reading him his rights. 3 months later, the Jefferson County Courthouse delivered its final judgment with swift, uncompromising justice. Melissa received 5 years in federal prison for embezzlement, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Her tearful plea for leniency, claiming she'd been manipulated by Dante, fell on deaf ears when prosecutors played recordings of her orchestrating the entire scheme. Dante received 7 years for establishing fraudulent nonprofit organizations and money laundering, His attempts to blame everything on Melissa's emotional manipulation crumbled under the weight of financial records showing his active participation in every transaction. Bryan stood on the courthouse steps afterward, Emma's small hand secure in his. The Denver skyline stretched out behind them like a promise of new possibilities. The media attention had been intense but brief. Wealthy tech entrepreneur's wife embezzles from children's charity while conducting a fair. But Bryan had maintained dignified silence throughout the proceedings. "Daddy, are we going home now?" Emma asked, her voice carrying the resilience that had amazed him throughout the entire ordeal. "Yes, sweetheart. We're going home." Do you think Bryan was too brutal with his revenge? Drop your comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more interesting and true-to-life stories.